The richest people rarely broadcast how they keep getting richer. Look at family offices in quiet neighborhoods or the legal pages of old corporations and you'll find the same moves repeated. Ownership split from control, income time to fall in low-tax windows, and small contractual tweaks that change who pays what decades later. Most headlines celebrate the sale or the valuation spike. But the real edge is what comes after, rolling gains into tax-advantaged vehicles, structuring deals so liability sits elsewhere, and preserving voting power while shedding economic risk. Those paper choices turn a one-time payday into generational advantage. You can see it in everyday examples. One family puts the lake house into a trust and charges the operating business market rent. Another founder takes deferred compensation instead of salary. Tiny entries on a ledger that alter tax bills, legal exposure, and who controls cash flow years down the road. Chasing quick wins hides these moves. If the focus is only on exits and headlines, the structural protections never get built, and earnings disappear into taxes, fees, or disputes. Design changes outcomes as much as returns do. This isn't drama or secrecy for secrecy's sake. It's practical cause and effect, timing, legal form, and allocation change who benefits, and the difference is measurable in dollars and control. Concrete examples follow: estate setups that cut long-term tax bills, deal structures that preserve control without public ownership, and the small clauses in contracts that decided who kept the upside. Silent leverage, turning influence into financial optionality. Most people notice flashy endorsements and headlines, but real financial maneuvering often happens quietly through deals that convert influence into optionality. Short sentence. For example, an advisor who brings a founder a customer or a key hire might be granted advisory equity that vests only if milestones are hit, turning a relationship into a low-cost claim on future upside rather than a taxable fee today. Short sentence. That trade, influence now for the right to participate later, is the basic unit of silent leverage. A common way this shows up is through pro rata rights and board influence secured in private negotiations rather than public filings. Short sentence. When an investor insists on pro rata, they can maintain ownership through follow-on rounds, which preserves upside if the company grows and reduces the need to hunt for new opportunities later. Similarly, a board observer or board seat lets someone shape hiring or M and a cadence without carrying headline risk. Short sentence. Those quiet terms turn episodic help into systematic optionality. Control of information and deal flow creates another channel for converting social capital into financial optionality. Short sentence. If a banker or connector consistently introduces winning founders, they can spin a special purpose vehicle, SPV, or negotiate convertible instruments and warrants in lieu of a straight fee, so every introduction becomes a multiplicative claim on future value rather than a one-time payment. Short sentence. Over time, that pattern builds a portfolio of asymmetric bets anchored by credibility. People also use compensation design and legal wrappers to make influence durable and downside limited. Short sentence. A founder who takes lower cash pay in exchange for preferred shares or a convertible note preserves runway for growth while retaining upside, and advisors who accept milestone-based royalties or warrants get protection if a project stalls. Trusts, nominee structures, or side letters can be used to keep stakes out of public view so the holder can exercise options without moving markets. Short sentence. That combination of limited downside, deferred upside, and information control is what turns influence into real financial optionality. Structures over signals. How legal and financial frameworks shield wealth. People notice flashy mansions and sport cars, but the real separation between public image and private control is made through legal entities and paperwork. A trust or an LLC is more than a name on a sign. It creates a legal fence. Because those fences change who the law recognizes as owner, they change who faces lawsuits, who sits on public registries, and who signs checks. Privacy and continuity matter to families with complex assets. Transferring real estate, art, or business interests into a trust or holding company often means the individual's name doesn't show up in the same public searches as direct ownership does. That reduces curiosity-driven exposure, and it also simplifies transitions because assets titled to a trust pass under its terms rather than through a court process that can be slow and public. Risk isolation is a common motive, plain and simple. By putting operating businesses in one entity and valuable property like a yacht or investment portfolio in another, a single liability event is less likely to wipe out everything. Yacht owners often register vessels in a separate LLC, so a dockside accident becomes a claim against the vessel company rather than the family's main balance sheet. Governance and tax compliance drive the day-to-day design of these frameworks. A family office centralizes payroll, tax filings, investment decisions, and vendor contracts to reduce mistakes and to ensure required disclosures are handled consistently. At the same time, international reporting rules and beneficial ownership registries have pushed structures to be transparent where the law demands it. So modern frameworks balance confidentiality, legal compliance, and clear lines of control rather than hiding behind secrecy. Closed-door networks, access, information asymmetry, and quiet deals. Many high-value opportunities never show up on an exchange or in a press release. Private invitations, alumni referrals, and boardroom conversations funnel deal flow to a small set of people before anyone else hears about it. Venture capital firms, boutique placement agents, and family offices routinely allocate capacity by reputation and relationship rather than by open application. The result is straightforward. When access is limited, the first offer often sets the terms, and outsiders are left to compete on price after the main rounds are filled. People inside those rooms hold non-public facts that matter. Revenue trends, upcoming contract wins, executive departures, or a lender's willingness to provide leverage are all the kinds of details that change the economics of a transaction but rarely appear in a public report. NDAs, board minutes, and side letters create legal and social barriers to wider disclosure. Because that information is concentrated, deals can be priced on terms that external markets would not support if everyone knew the same thing. There are practical ways quiet deals are put together. Secondary sales of employee equity, for example, are often arranged through intermediaries who check accreditation status and run confidentiality protocols before matching buyers and sellers. Real estate developers regularly source parcels off-market through local brokers and community relationships to avoid bidding wars. In private credit and private equity, club deals let several investors pool capital and negotiate a bilateral sale process rather than exposing the opportunity to a broad auction. Those mechanics keep information flow tight and allow parties to control timing, price signaling, and headline risk. That secrecy changes outcomes across the board. When insiders get first access, they can capture outsized returns or preserve downside protection that never shows up in public performance tables. It also concentrates liquidity. Assets move in negotiated pockets and then reappear in public markets only after the main value transfer has occurred. Regulators and enforcement bodies still constrain clear abuses. Trading on material non-public information is a legal risk, yet the interplay of reputation, contract law, and selective disclosure keeps many profitable transactions out of sight. Observers outside these networks rely on indirect signs, placement announcements, advisor movements, or secondary market activity to infer where the action is, but those signals always lag the private conversations that actually shape outcomes. Calibrated risk, hedging and timing without public spectacle. There's a familiar tension between protecting a large position and tipping the market off. Publicly buying a hedge or unloading shares in volume often signals negative information, which can cause the price to move against you and turn a prudent risk management move into an expensive one. Banks and counterparties can arrange privately negotiated derivatives or swaps so that downside protection is obtained without an obvious market footprint. That discretion reduces the chance of front-running and preserves execution quality. Timing matters more than headline moves. Executing a sale across days with VWAP or TWAP algorithms, using iceberg orders, or routing blocks to dark pools spreads out market impact and blunts signaling. And that matters when a single order could change analyst narratives or trigger index rebalancing. Insiders and executives often rely on scheduled plans to avoid anno domini hoc trades that draw attention. 10b5-1 plans and pre-authorized windows let them drift toward liquidity without creating sudden headlines. A negotiated secondary or an off-exchange block to an institutional buyer can quietly reduce concentration without sparking a rout. Hedges come in shapes that manage cost and optics. Collars, buying puts while selling calls, let an owner cap downside cost effectively and do so in ways that are often arranged ODC so the market doesn't read them as a negative forecast. Equity swaps and forward contracts can transfer downside risk to a bank and exchange for funding or periodic payments. And because these are bilateral instruments, they avoid exchange-level disclosures that would otherwise telegraph intent. Firms also layer currency forwards, futures, or variance swaps to isolate the specific exposure they want to neutralize, which keeps hedging precise and discreet. Process beats panic. Setting liquidity buckets, predefined rebalancing thresholds, and staggered execution plans means decisions happen according to rules rather than in response to fear, and that prevents forced, visible transactions. Working with specialist brokers and using scenario-driven stress tests helps identify when structured OTC hedges or negotiated placements are the better route, and maintaining clear records and compliant trading plans preserves governance and avoids regulatory scrutiny. The outcome is a preserved optionality. You control downside without inviting market attention, and you keep the upside intact. Income alchemy, shaping revenue streams that outlast trends. A single viral moment can drive a flood of orders without proving that customers will stick around. That spike often comes from one channel, an influencer, a platform algorithm, a sudden cultural moment, and when the channel changes, so does the revenue. Companies that rely on one source find themselves rebuilding from scratch when attention shifts. The tension is simple. Short-term demand looks like growth but hides fragility. One strong approach is to assemble different revenue engines that respond to different buyer behaviors. Subscriptions capture habit, licensing converts IP into predictable royalties, enterprise contracts tether revenue to organizational budgets, and one-off product sales feed immediate cash. For example, a software maker might sell direct subscriptions to consumers, license the same core technology to a partner that embeds it in their product, and also offer paid integrations for enterprise customers, which spreads risk because platform algorithm changes or a fad in consumer interest won't kill all three at once. This mix matters because each channel has its own acquisition levers and retention dynamics, so when one weakens, the others can sustain the business. Turning one-time buyers into ongoing relationships changes the math. Sell a razor handle and you get a single payment. Sell the blades and you get repeat orders. The same principle applies to content creators who pair a premium course, one time, with a monthly community membership, ongoing, which smooths revenue and increases customer lifetime value. Embedding partners and building ecosystems creates durability. Opening an API invites other companies to build on your platform, which creates complementary revenue streams like developer fees, integrations, and channel partnerships. A fitness app that partners with gyms for group classes while selling premium subscriptions to home users can rely on institutional revenue even if consumer trends shift, because the partnership ties the product to organizations that budget annually and value predictable services. Pricing and contract design convert volatility into predictability. Enterprises often accept higher prices in exchange for multi-year commitments, and prepaid or tiered memberships create upfront cash that buffers slow months. The effect is straightforward. Predictable cash lets a business invest in product improvements or new channels without panicking every time an Anno Domini campaign underperforms. Ongoing measurement separates what's durable from what's temporary. Cohort retention analysis shows whether a feature or channel improves long-term engagement, and A/B pricing tests reveal which segments will pay for permanence versus novelty. Teams that track these signals can allocate marketing and product spend to channels that raise lifetime value and cut back on ones that only produce fleeting spikes. The result is a revenue portfolio that survives platform swings, cultural fads, and economic noise. Legacy systems, passing power through institutions rather than ego. Power collapses fast when authority is tied to one charismatic person. Organizations built around a face or a name lose momentum the moment that person leaves, falters, or changes priorities. That fragility pushes many high-net-worth families and leaders to formalize control into structures, trusts, boards, charters, that keep influence alive without requiring constant personal stewardship. The practical result is stability. Rules and legal instruments let values and resources continue to operate even when egos shift or heirs choose different paths. Look at how foundations, endowments, and family offices are designed to persist beyond any single personality, and you'll see power translated into processes rather than performances. A concrete mechanism is the independent board. Boards that include people outside the immediate family or inner circle reduce the risk of emotional decision-making. When a family business installs outside directors and a professional CEO, operational continuity improves and the company is more likely to survive leadership transitions. Stakeholders get predictable governance and creditors and partners gain confidence. Trusts and voting agreements play a similar role by codifying who decides what and when, and by setting contingency rules for succession, incapacity, or disputes. Those written rules convert personal intention into institutional obligation. Institutions also amplify influence by funding and credentialing ideas rather than broadcasting a leader's opinions. An endowment that supports research, scholarships, or public interest projects shapes academic agendas and policy debates for decades after the founders step back. Think tanks, university chairs, and grant-making foundations create networks of expertise and legitimacy that outlast any single spokesperson. The effect is multiplier power. Money plus structure produces sustained attention, repeated citations, and access to decision makers, which in turn shapes norms and options available to future leaders. There are trade-offs, and they matter. Structures can calcify mission, repel innovation, or be captured by interests that diverge from the founder's intent. A foundation that never revisits its goals risks irrelevance, and a board without rotation can become a closed club. That's why durable institutions often bake in renewal mechanisms, term limits, review cycles, sunset clauses, or independent oversight, to balance continuity with adaptability. When institutional design pairs clear fiduciary duties and transparent reporting with mechanisms for renewal, power survives the founder without freezing the organization in amber. You've probably noticed the super wealthy don't broadcast their playbooks. They quietly use private deals, aligned incentives, concentrated bets, tax-aware structures, patient time horizons, and repeatable systems. And because those moves avoid bidding wars, cut fees, and create asymmetric upside, the advantage compounds without headlines. That can feel unfair when you're watching public markets and paying fees for returns that barely beat inflation. Chasing the same ETFs or hot funds often means paying the price of popularity, while a well-timed co-investment or a founder equity grant can preserve returns simply by sidestepping that competition. You might have wondered what is actually practical for someone who isn't a billionaire. It's less about a magic trick and more about language, relationships, and discipline. Learning to read deal terms, building a network that gives access, and setting up structures so small edges turn into meaningful gains over decades. First won't pretend it happens overnight. Real results come from getting one or two direct opportunities right, holding through volatility, and reinvesting wisely. And in the next videos, First will unpack a real family office case study, a founder equity example, and the exact contract clauses that change outcomes so you can see how it plays out in the numbers. If you've watched this far, you care about quiet edges more than flashy tips. If that resonates, there will be another deep dive soon. You might find it useful to follow along so those concrete stories arrive in your feed and we can keep exploring the low noise ways advantage is built.